If you feel like you're juggling multiple tasks at once, struggling to stay focused, and you're not seeing real progress with your language learning, then this video is for you. G'day mates, my name's Matthew and I want to help you learn languages smarter, faster, and more effectively on your own. Today we're diving into some fascinating ideas from the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. And we'll see how we can apply those principles to transform your language learning journey. Now, I've actually got the book here in Mandarin Chinese, but I've also read it in English, and you can get this book in different languages. Now, trust me, the tips from this book have helped me immensely, and I'm sure they can help you too. I've broken down this video into 8 core concepts that I learned from the book. 1. The power of the one thing. The core message of the one thing is simple. Focus on what truly matters. In the book, Gary Keller explains that focusing on your one key action can lead to better results in the long run. It's all about simplifying your priorities. And let's see how we can apply this simple concept to language learning. The foundation of Keller's method is asking yourself the focusing question. What's the one thing that if you did it, then everything else would become easier or unnecessary? For language learners, this means that instead of scattering your time and attention on all kinds of language apps, courses, and videos, you should instead drive all of your focus and attention onto just one high-impact activity that can give you the most momentum. For example, if you're studying a language such as Spanish, you might decide that your one thing is to focus on speaking practice every morning. Now, I actually faced something like this when I failed my DELE Spanish exam the first time around. I truly bombed at the speaking section, and I realized that the one thing I really needed to focus on next was speaking. So I made it a habit to regularly practice my speaking. By deciding on just focusing on speaking well at that time, I could put all of my attention into that habit. And at the same time, I could then improve my other language skills like pronunciation, my vocabulary, because I'd find words that I couldn't express. I'd also improve my grammar because then I'd be forced to string words and sentences together. Now, all of this helped to set the tone of my language learning during that phase. And having that focus gave me a clearer direction to go towards. So in your case, maybe think about what is truly holding you back from your language learning journey. Focus on that one priority and you might find that everything else will go a lot smoother. 2. The domino effect in language learning. In The One Thing, Keller uses the metaphor of the domino effect to explain how small focused actions can lead to massive results. Just like how a small domino can have the power to knock over a much larger one, when you do the right small action consistently, then this can lead to much bigger results. In language learning, this principle can be huge because small wins can lead to much bigger ones. And when it comes to my own language learning, what I like to do is to first organize the different language skills that I want to master and arrange them in a way that I first tackle those different areas and accomplish them well before I move on to the next. For instance, when I start off with a new language, I often begin with improving my pronunciation. I start to learn the alphabet. I hear the sounds by using techniques like the International Phonetic Alphabet and minimal pairs, and I listen a lot to the spoken form of the language. By improving my pronunciation and my listening skills, I can then pronounce words a lot better, hear them well, and as I learn new words and vocabulary, and sentence structures, I'm able to say them in a more natural way. So this small win actually helps me at the beginning to then lead to bigger and better results later when I then move on to vocabulary and grammar and improving my listening comprehension of native input. The point of all this is to line up your language learning priorities just like dominoes and to knock them down and knock them over one at a time. So you do get that momentum and feeling of success each time that you get these small wins. Over time, you'll find that you're making much faster progress than you could have ever imagined. 3. Why not everything matters equally. One of the biggest challenges that a language learner faces is being overwhelmed by the sheer number of things that you could be doing to improve your language. You could be doing vocabulary, grammar, you could be speaking, you could be listening, you could be reading or writing, and it feels like you've got to be doing all of these things all at the same time, but it's really not possible. But here's a critical truth from the book. Not everything matters equally, and you don't have to feel overwhelmed by trying to do everything all at once. It's actually better to just focus on one thing at a time. And when you do that, this can actually help speed you up in the long run. Trying to do too much can really slow you down. And Gary Keller brings on the idea of the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, which states that 80% of your results come from just 20% of your actions. Think about it this way. Instead of just opening up a dictionary in your target language and trying to master random words from there, why not prioritize the words that are highly frequently used in that language? Not all words are created equally, in the sense of not all words are used as often as others. When you know this, you can then focus on the words that will give you the most conversational power, meaning that you're more likely to use those words than others. It doesn't make sense to prioritize learning the longest words, the most technical, the jargon type words that are overly formal. Those kinds of words, you can probably learn them later if you come to them in a certain context. If you're just a beginner or intermediate, it's best to hone in your attention on the words that are most likely to be used in a conversation or in a book or TV show that interests you. Doing some of the linguistics research myself, I found that around 2,000 words in a language will help you understand about 90% of the words in any text, especially in spoken materials. So it just makes sense to focus on those top 2,000 or so words first, rather than trying to learn the hundreds and thousands of words in a random dictionary. By focusing on the most impactful tasks in language learning, you'll save yourself time and you'll save yourself from burnout. 4. The dangers of multitasking in language learning. Now let's talk about multitasking, which I've fell into that trap a number of times in the past, and I'm sure many of you have dealt with this problem of multitasking too. It's tempting to think that you can learn from a grammar book and at the same time study from a language app like Anki or Duolingo, and even have a language podcast in the background that you believe you can listen to and comprehend. It sounds all good and pretty smart, right? Well, the one thing tells us that multitasking can be a productivity killer. What happens is you end up dividing your attention across all of these different language learning tasks, and you end up not being effective in any of them. So here's a tip for language learning. When you sit down to learn your language, just pick one area to focus on at a time. If you want to improve your listening, then just sit down and listen. Don't be reviewing flashcards or checking your email at the same time. Give your full undivided attention to whatever part of the language you're trying to improve. And when you give this full, focused attention, you'll find that you can improve your retention and understanding. 5. Build one habit at a time. The book also highlights that success comes from building one habit at a time. Language learning is no different. Often, when you feel stuck in language learning, it's not about needing more discipline or more motivation. It may come down to you needing to build better habits. And better habits all comes down to making those habits small and consistent. Here's an example from my own life. When I was going through a plateau of language learning and I had felt burnt out, but wanted to get back into language learning, I started with small, consistent habits. One habit that I thought would be small, easy, and which I could make consistent was to watch TV shows and movies in my target language whenever I had free time. I started doing that for about 15 minutes a day in the evenings, and once that habit was established, I thought another habit I could do was to take advantage of the rest periods during my workouts. And in that time, I thought I could build another habit of reviewing my Anki flashcards. Over time, these small actions snowballed into a daily routine that just feels effortless now. The key is to focus on building one habit at a time, not trying to overhaul your entire language learning routine. 6. Willpower and energy management. A really fascinating concept from The One Thing is that willpower isn't unlimited. Now, I know, we as language learners, we think that we can get in there and be all gung-ho. We can study 24/7, no worries. We can learn that language no matter what. But the thing is, our energy and focus does deplete over the course of a day. And even though we can try to push ourselves with sheer willpower to study or to improve our fluency, sometimes it won't work because we're just tired. So how can you apply this? Well, one thing you can do is to make sure that when you're learning your languages, you're doing so when your willpower and energy is at its highest. For most people, that's during the morning, once they've gotten up and feel a lot more refreshed. If you find that learning kanji or hanzi from Japanese or Chinese is really difficult and it's hard to get all of those characters into your brain, then why not consider doing them earlier in the day when you're feeling more energetic rather than later at night when you're totally drained. Don't leave those hardest language learning tasks for the end of the day when you're mentally exhausted. 7. Review the focusing question. Now let's circle back to the most powerful concept from The One Thing. It can be very helpful to review that question every day. Every day, ask yourself, what's the one thing that if you do that thing, it will make all other things much easier or unnecessary? You can ask this question every day. For example, if you're struggling with German articles, der, die, das, and it's just so overwhelming, this can actually be the answer to that question for you. What's the one thing that if you did that, it would make other things easier and unnecessary? Well, for you, it might be to improve and master on those German articles. Because once you improve and master those, it will help you with all other types of grammar and vocabulary. So keep asking this focusing question every day. And by doing so, it will make sure you concentrate on the most effective way and the fastest way to get the most impactful results. 8. Time blocking. Finally, let's talk about time blocking, which you can use to protect your language learning time. This can be one of the most practical ways to supercharge your learning. So what is time blocking? It's simple. it's when you set aside time to do only language learning. You shouldn't have any distractions bothering you. And what that means is you should turn off notifications, ignore your phone, close all your tabs, and just keep your mind focused on language learning, nothing else. If you can devote just 30 minutes to 1 hour a day of dedicated language learning, then you may find that your progress will be much faster than if you just had 5 minutes or 10 minutes here or there while multitasking. To wrap things up, remember this: the path to mastering a language isn't just about doing more. It's about doing the right things, the one thing that could make all other tasks much easier or even unnecessary. So have a think about it. What's the one thing or next action that you need to take to improve your language learning? And once you have that one thing, you may find that you're still having trouble turning it into a sustainable habit. So be sure to check out this next video where I talk about more practical strategies to turn actions into long-term habits.